Let's not confuse the two. But apparently, the message did not get through. We have this confused mindset. And confused mindset leads to policy implementation challenges. Solvable? Yes. A bit more challenging? Yes. More difficult? Yes. More sleepless nights? Yes. Easily preventable? Just make an amendment. Cybersecurity, cybercrime, totally different animal. The other problem we have is cyber squatting. Nobody has mentioned this. But cyber squatting is misplaced in Section 4. Cyber squatting is not part of the Section 4 concept. It was just placed there, and now in the IRR we have additional work to find out how cyber squatting can fit mindset. Because you and I know, whatever you do, it starts with the mind. You understand it, you comprehend it, you rationalize it, then you move forward with the action steps. Here, the legislator gave us a piece of which we're responsible. We're holding this fora. We're spending time and effort doing this. But cyber squatting, how do we manage this? This is a totally different thing that we don't want because it confuses the law in the same sense that it mixes cybersecurity and cybercrime. But it's there. We'll do what we can. This, especially, I'm addressing this to women advocates and children advocates. Be very careful with this. Work together with us. Because in Section 4C1, it punishes cybersex. Remember this era of hauling women from cybersex dens, being photographed, and they're hiding their photos like this? Remember? We thought, from the department as Child and Women Rights Advocacy, that this was a thing of the past. If there's something medieval about the law, it's this particular section. Why is that? Because when this was legislated like this, it did not consider all the other provisions. Therefore, based on the reading of that particular cybersex provisions, the concept of cybersex or trafficked women as victims is now fudged. We need to fix that in the IRR to clarify that women victims who are exploited, who do it out of economic necessity, who may not be as privileged as you or me, will not be punished of the era of where they're hauled off to the NBI or PNP, taken photographs. That is not what Cybercrime Prevention Act is for. It's against the criminals out there, transnational organized crimes out there that are destroying the fabric of society, not against women and children like this. So help us, if you have women's groups, women's contacts, let's start looking at how the IRR can harmonize provisions of this and yet maintain the spirit and point of the law. And this brings us back to my final point about all of these laws being passed piecemeal. There's no framework. There's no aspect. Hayden ko, let's do this. Many child pornography issues, let's do this. Trafficking issues, the US says, you have many trafficking, let's pass this. E-commerce act, I love you virus. Access devices, strong lobby from credit cards in the banking industry. Crime Prevention Act, who knows? We need a framework of how we want to punish criminal actions in our country. And hopefully, this will be start of a new beginning. Let this be a lesson learned for everyone. You cannot legislate without the context in a vacuum. And that's creating a lot of problems. When law enforcement go against the bad people, we're confused with sections to use. Some sections are conflicting. You would file Section 1, RA1, in relation to Section 2, RA2, in relation to Section 3, RA3. Makes for bad law, makes fugitives, makes it funny for law enforcement in the Philippines. Last slide. And this has to do with the implementation issue. This is now the web design that we have. Everybody's familiar with how the web structure works, correct? It's distributed. There's no single central node. It's meant to just be available anywhere, everywhere. So far, so good. Even the tech people will understand this. This is now the model. But when the legislators were legislating this, they had this in mind, a table of organization to implement the Cybercrime Prevention Act. We have been very consistent and say, if this is the model, if you want to design a structure effectively for implementation, then your model for implementation should at least mirror this. Because you're after a certain specter, you're after a certain phenomenon. So you need to design it carefully so you can be responsive and flexible and dynamic to meet the threat of cybercrime. But apparently, this is what they have in mind as legislature. Table of organizations, and then by the time you get a quorum, you don't even have to worry about getting a court order. and that we've been very strongly against it. And again, this is before the time of Yusek Casambre. The CICC, we have to tweak that a bit, because just getting a quorum, the enforcement is already gone. So we'll also have to fix that maybe through an operation center to make sure that we are nimble enough when there's a kidnapping in progress, when money is being transferred out of the country for money laundering reasons, or if there's a drug syndicate that's about to do a buy-bust operation. Those are the things that we need. Not blogging, not tweeting, not liking. So, last two slides. What is now the criminal justice response? These are the things that we've lined up. This is a product of 10 years of work. We're now having a Q&A on the guide on cybercrime. This will be available for everyone, maybe different languages. The Joint Investigation Manual for law enforcement and prosecutors. We also want to delineate PNP and NBI so we don't have duplicity in resources. We already have 150 trained investigators, courtesy of Prosecutor Arellano. Electronic Evidence Guide. This is now manualized to guide everyone, even private sector, on how to use electronic evidence. This is about 100 pages long, but very easy to read. But what's the beauty of this? You just have to use the forms. What are the forms for complaining? What's the checklist for chain of custody? What's the checklist for going to courts? This is the effective way to interdict transnational organized crime. These are all in various stages of preparation because we have to wait for the law and, of course, the petitions. Regardless of the outcome, we will, of course, work with what we have. Accession to the Convention on Cybercrime. I'm very happy to report that we have been invited to accede to the only convention on cybercrime worldwide, and hopefully will be the first developing country to accede to this in due time. We have to do this in less than a year, and we will be COE compliant. Just a short story. When we got the enrolled bill at the last minute, we were not getting a copy at the last portion. We immediately sent it to our Council of Europe counterpart and say, this is now the present cybercrime bill. Will it meet the standards of the Budapest Convention? Please do a quick review. Because if it doesn't, then we will have to recommend we change it. Because what's the point of having a standalone cybercrime law? You need to work together, especially if the servers are in Google in the States, the servers are in Singapore, the servers could be anywhere. It has to be international cooperation. The answer was, yes, it's 80-85% compliant. We have certain reservations, but if you pass this law as it is, you will make the cut. So we recommend to the President, sir, let's go for it. Better than nothing. Let's just work on implementing rules on how we can make it better. So there's full visibility, at least on the executive, going up. That's our recommendation. What would have been the other part? We recommended, sir, we have problems with the structure, cybersecurity, cybercrime, it's confused, libel should not be there, all of these little things should not be there. What happens? We go back, another Congress, we don't know. So we said, let's go ahead, see how we can work it out. Network of monitors, investigators, this is where you come in. Your favorite part. We are trying to build up from the law how the procedure goes. From the time you complain, from the time you feel offended, until the time that you get to report it. So this will be consulted. We will not use the traditional models of investigation because that's no longer relevant. We will see how that goes. And speaking of this, we need a societal response. That's why we're saying the Philippines will lead the way in criminal law enforcement. Internet safety for children. We have a very young population, very internet savvy, very, very high internet usage. We need our own protocols for Filipino children, especially if they're single-parent households. Very unique in the country. Civility in cyberspace. Golden rule in cyberspace. Very simple. Huwag niyong patulan yung nag-aaway sa internet. Hayaan na lang natin. No? You don't have to have this speculation. Last night on prime time, people were saying the DOJ has a dubious agenda in setting the forum. The DOJ has a dubious agenda in moving it to land bank. The DOJ is trying to co-opt all the critics. You know, people can say anything, say everything, but the best is always to appeal to the higher sense of intellectual discourse, of reasonable discussion among Filipinos. Restorative justice, I'll skip this quickly back to that. Crowdsourcing, as I told you, we want to have a process where maybe the 10 major ICT companies or ICT groups can say, we received this complaint, we have verified the particular complaint, it's not a harassment, it's not something, and maybe have an express lane. We don't know the contours yet. As I said, we're developing a new strategy.